Priya and her old university roommate turned 34 the same month this year. Priya moved to Mississauga from Bangalore 3 years ago, software engineer, same degree, same industry as her roommate, who was born in Oakville and never left. Statistics Canada put a number on the space between them in a study released this past March. Canadian-born families aged 25 to 44 had a median net worth of $293,900 in 2023. Recent immigrant families in the same age bracket, 0 to 9 years since landing, $132,300. Less than half. Here is the twist almost nobody puts in the headline. That same study found established immigrant families 10 or more years in Canada sitting at $751,500, ahead of Canadian-born families of the same age at $608,400. Not catching up. Ahead, by $143,100, and the lead is growing every survey wave. 2 facts. Both true. Both from the same government study. The gap that defines your 20s and 30s as an immigrant in Canada is not the same gap that defines your 50s. What separates the people who close it from the people who don't is not luck, and it is barely about income. It is 5 specific, measurable mechanisms, and Priya, right now, is standing directly inside the first one. Priya's actual problem is not her salary. It is her T4. She has a registered pension plan through work worth almost nothing yet, and a modest RRSP she started 8 months ago. Among recent immigrant families with a university-educated main earner, private pension assets RPP and RRSP combined make up a small fraction of total wealth, while for Canadian-born families with the same education, those accounts routinely account for a much larger share, built over a decade or more of uninterrupted contributions their Canadian-born peers had a head start on. The reason isn't effort. A Statistics Canada analysis released this past April, combining labor force data from September 2024 and September 2025, found that 32.6% of recent immigrants with post-secondary credentials report being overqualified for their current job, compared with 19.1% of Canadian-born workers. 20.8% are working in a field completely unrelated to what they studied, versus 15.6% of the Canadian-born. Priya spent 4 months applying before landing a role 2 levels below her actual experience, at a company with no pension matching in her first 2 years. This is exactly why, among university-educated families in this age bracket, the wealth gap is the single largest in the entire Statistics Canada dataset, $246,800, bigger than the gap for immigrants without a degree. The credential that was supposed to close the distance widens at first, because it takes years to get recognized at its real value. The action for anyone in Priya's position: request every credential recognition assessment your regulatory body offers before you land, not after. For engineers, that's Engineers Canada's credential evaluation. For many other professions, World Education Services. And open the RRSP or Workplace RPP the day pension eligibility starts, even at the minimum contribution, because every year of delay here is a year that shows up permanently in the numbers above. Not every wage gap in this conversation belongs to the same group, and conflating them hides the sharpest trend of all. A Bank of Canada staff paper published in 2025 tracked wages for non-permanent residents, temporary foreign workers, international students, refugee claimants, not landed immigrants against Canadian-born workers. From 2006 to 2014, that wage gap averaged 9.5%. From 2023 to 2024, it had more than doubled to 22.6%. This is a distinct population from everyone else in this video, and it is the fastest widening gap in the entire Canadian labor market, not a footnote. Raymond is on a closed work permit in the Fraser Valley, tied to a single employer, no path to switch jobs without restarting his immigration process. His wage sits well below what a landed immigrant or a Canadian-born worker earns for the same task in the same industry, precisely because a closed permit removes his ability to negotiate with his feet. Landed immigrants and non-permanent residents get lumped into the same word immigrant in almost every casual conversation about this topic. Statistics Canada does not lump them, and neither should the math. The action here is a matter of precision, not comfort. Any statistic on immigrants in Canada that doesn't specify landed status and years since landing is not precise enough to act on. If you are on a closed work permit, the single highest leverage move is toward an open permit or permanent residency pathway as early as your program allows, because the 22.6% gap is structurally tied to the closed permit itself, not to any measurable difference in skill or output. Ana arrived from El Salvador in 2019 with no university degree, and by every measure in Section 1.3 of that Statistics Canada report, she should be furthest behind. She was, for about 3 years. Among recent immigrant families without a degree, aged 25 to 44, median net worth was $80,600 in 2023, against $226,900 for comparable Canadian-born families, a real, painful gap. But the composition of what little wealth these families do have looks different from the degree-holding group, and Anna's own story shows exactly why. Business equity and other assets made up 42% of young recent immigrant wealth in 2023, against 33% for Canadian-born families the same age. Ana runs an incorporated residential cleaning company now, for employees. The entry rate into self-employment for recent immigrants 5 years or less in Canada was 37%, more than double the 17% rate for Canadian-born individuals of the same period. Nationally, immigrants own 23.7% of all private sector businesses in Canada, almost exactly matching the 23% immigrant share of the population, and immigrant-owned firms pay 16 to 23% higher taxes per worker than Canadian-born-owned firms, according to a 2025 Statistics Canada fiscal analysis. Business ownership is not a guaranteed shortcut. Firms majority owned by immigrants show labor productivity 9.4% lower than Canadian-born-owned firms on average, widening to almost 21% lower at firms with 100 or more employees, concentrated among small operations without access to the same capital and networks. Anna's margins are thin. But equity in her own company compounds in a way a paycheck never does, and it is the one asset class where recent immigrants without a degree are already outpacing their Canadian-born peers of the same age, dollar for dollar, right now. The action for anyone in Anna's position, incorporation, even for a small operation, converts labor into an appreciating asset instead of an hourly wage, and it is worth a one-time consultation with an accountant. The year revenue crosses 6 figures, specifically to check whether incorporating changes your tax and equity position. The Wu family moved to Richmond Hill from Hong Kong in 2005. 20 years in Canada this year. Their net worth sits close to $930,000, and the mechanism behind that number is almost entirely one asset, the house. Among established immigrant families aged 35 to 64, average equity in their principal residence was $432,100 in 2023, 46.6% of their total wealth, against $283,400, 34.9%, for Canadian-born families the same age. Homeownership rates between the two groups are now almost identical, around 70% each. The difference is not whether they own. It's what the house is worth, and where it sits. 37.2% of established immigrant homeowners live in the Toronto census metropolitan area, versus just 7.5% of established Canadian-born homeowners, who are far more likely to be spread across small cities and rural areas where prices simply appreciated less over the same 20 years. The Wus bought a semi-detached house in 2007 for $412,000. Today it appraises above $1.6 million. That single decision, made when their combined income was under $70,000 a year, now accounts for most of the $143,100 wealth advantage established immigrant families hold over Canadian-born families in the same StatCan dataset. This block is the direct reversal of Priya's block. The same forces that hurt a recent immigrant in year 3, locked out of the priciest housing markets, thin pension history, become the exact same forces that help an established immigrant in year 20, because home equity, not pension equity, is what appreciated fastest in Canada's biggest cities over the last 2 decades, and immigrants concentrate disproportionately in exactly those cities. The action for anyone still years away from this stage, the data says the earliest possible entry into any form of home equity, even a condo, even outside Toronto or Vancouver, matters more for eventual net worth than almost any other single decision, because equity in the highest appreciating asset class compounds for decades once you're in it, and does nothing for you at all while you're outside it. Rosario is 68. She arrived from the Philippines at 54, worked as a caregiver in Scarborough for 11 years before her body made the job impossible. She has been in Canada 14 years, technically an established immigrant by StatCan's own definition, but she arrived 14 years too late for the mechanism that helped the Wus. Among immigrants over 65, roughly 30% experience chronic low income, defined as 5 or more consecutive years under the low income line, nearly 3 times the rate among immigrants aged 25 to 54, and Canadian-born seniors sit at just 1.9% chronic low income, the lowest of any age group in the country. Immigrant seniors who arrived 5 to 10 years before that measurement had chronic low income rates above 50%. Rosario has 30 years less CPP contribution history than a Canadian-born senior her age, and she landed too late in life to build meaningful RPP or home equity before her working years ran out. Poverty rates confirm the same pattern from a different angle. Immigrants in Canada 10 or more years sit at 7.5% poverty, barely above the 6% rate for the Canadian-born, but immigrants who arrived in just the last 5 years sit at 16.1%, refugees at 13.8%, and non-permanent residents at roughly 34%, the highest of any group Statistics Canada tracks. The mechanism that turns immigration into a wealth advantage, 20, 25, 30 years of compounding home equity and pension contributions, simply never got the runway for someone who arrived at 54. Age at landing is not a footnote in this story. For a meaningful share of immigrant seniors, it is the entire story. The action here is systemic rather than personal. GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, exists precisely for seniors in Rosario's position, and OAS itself is prorated by years of Canadian residency after 18, not by CPP contributions, meaning even a full career of work overseas does not fill this specific gap. Anyone supporting a parent or relative who immigrated later in life should check GIS eligibility through Service Canada now, not after the shortfall becomes urgent. Priya, Raymond, Anna, the WAS, and Rosario are not 5 different stories about immigration in Canada. They are 5 points on the same 20 to 30 year curve, measured at different places along it. The wealth gap is real and it is worst in exactly the years an immigrant needs at least to be, the first decade, while pension history is thin, credentials are unrecognized, and housing markets are already expensive. It reverses, on average, by year 10, and by year 20 it has flipped entirely in the immigrant family's favor, driven almost entirely by home equity, the one asset that rewarded early entry over the last 2 decades regardless of who owned it. And there is a final piece Statistics Canada didn't even need this March study to prove, because the data has existed for years. Children of immigrants graduate high school at 91.6% versus 88.8% for children of Canadian-born parents. University completion, 35.9% versus 24.4%. By age 20, 70.3% of second-generation Canadians are enrolled in or have completed post-secondary education, against 58.9% of their Canadian-born parent peers. And on average, the second generation earns more than their immigrant parents did at the same point in life, outperforming not just their parents, but their Canadian-born peers too. The wealth gap this video opened with $293,900 against $132,300 is real, it is documented by Statistics Canada, and it is not the end of the story for most families who experience it. It is closer to the opening chapter of a 20-year arc that, on average, ends with the immigrant family ahead, and ends with their Canadian-born children ahead of almost everyone. Which part of this curve is your own family standing on right now, the first decade, or the 20th? If this changed how you see the numbers behind your own timeline, hit like and subscribe for more of what the data actually says about money in Canada.